Hey everyone, so this is a quick walkthrough of my favorite box on HackTheBox so far. It's a retired box from a few years old. It's Linux, it's medium difficulty, it's called Craft. Deals primarily with credential exposure and credential reuse, so nothing too complicated or technical. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna just hop on that VPN real quick, pop open a new terminal, and I'm gonna organize myself just a tad. I'm gonna make a new TMUX session right here, and I'm gonna also make another window in TMUX, and I'm gonna pop open a note. I'm gonna just rename this to notes so I don't forget. Anyway, I'm gonna get started with a quick nmap scan of the box. Gonna get the IP, triple verbosity, all ports, standard version of service version detection, standard scripts. We've got 3 ports identified right away, so 22. So we can go ahead and just fingerprint that ahead of schedule. By looking at it, it seems to be Debian 10, so yeah, definitely a Linux box right there. There is another one as well. That's something called SSH 2.0 Go, which I don't know what that is, but we can also see what authentication methods we got going, which is public key and keyboard interactive. So it doesn't seem like we have password authentication enabled, so we'll need some sort of key available and some other authentication form called keyboard interactive. Honestly, not even sure what that is. So another thing we can do is we see port 443 that's open, that's HTTPS, so we can go ahead and just see if we can get anything from that by getting the headers. Very nice and easy to remember IP. Go ahead and yeah, we can see that it's Nginx 1.15.8, so we can go ahead and also run something called whatweb on that and see if we get any more information about sort of the technologies used on it. It's kind of like Wapalizer. It's fairly neat. We got something called Bootstrap. Oh, well, I know what Bootstrap is. We got jQuery. I was going to say something called Modernizer. I guess some kind of framework or something like that, or CSS type dealy. Anyway, so moving on, we can go to the website itself, and it will actually go ahead and read, Craft aims to be the largest repository of US produced craft brews accessible over REST. In the future, we will release a mobile app to interface with a public REST API. So we got some sort of API, essentially, that's going to let us do things. And on the page, there's only 2 links. There's nothing in the source code. There's nothing about the page otherwise. But 2 of them are to 2 domains, api.craft.htb and gogs.craft.htb. And this one has a git icon. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that to my Etsy hosts, and I'm going to say 10.10.10 craft.htb, api.craft.htb, and gogs.craft.htb. So, oops. Totally didn't do that on purpose because I didn't just learn this last week and wanted to show it off. But anyway, so that's done, and we can go ahead and pop those open now and see what we got. Also, because we got some subdomains, we can go ahead and just run a GoBuster vhost scan. Another way to craft.htb, and then oh yeah, I forgot the -u parameter right here. HTTPS craft.htb -w user share wordless derb common txt is just usually like what I go for. It's usually good enough for everything, plus it's very small, so you know it's a good way to get an indication if there's anything hiding that you want to take a deeper look at. And yeah, the SSL cert's out of date, but yeah, we get API, which we already know about. A lot of errors, probably because of special symbols like // and underscores and whatnot that the Nginx reverse proxy probably just didn't handle. And we get another subdomain that is worth looking at called vault.craft.htb. That's something interesting, so we should probably add that to our Etsy hosts as well. Nice. Okay, let's go ahead and run a little Ghostbuster dir scan on that vault.craft.htb and see what we find. See if there's anything interesting. And yeah, also we can see the domain and the SSL certificate. So if you didn't go on the website yet, that's another way to kind of, you can get at it. Yeah, we got v1, so we can go ahead and just sort of keep appending these directories to it as they pop up. Oops, now we gotta exclude the length of 36, which seems to be the error length for non-existing URLs, and eventually we will get to some endpoints here. Do /sys. Yeah, we get health, init, and leader, and if we go to any of those in our browser or retrieve it, it seems to be giving us a JSON of something of Vault cluster version 0.11.1, and that, if you look that up, belongs to basically HashiCorp Vault, which is a secrets management thing for enterprise software development. Now, back to the website, we got GOGS over here, a painless self-hosted Git service, and yeah, we get the version of that, and we get Explorer, which shows a public repository of the application itself. Now, immediately right away, we can see dbtest.py, and that has something imported from a file called settings, which contains all the MySQL database credentials and details and whatnot. So that's something we want to be on the lookout for. So this is pretty standard script for connecting to a MySQL database and retrieving some records to see what's what. And if we go into application.py, we'll see it uses worksug. It's written in Python, obviously. It's got Flask, so it uses the Flask web server, uses Swagger for UI documentation. You can see that these are the endpoints for the API. We got returning, we got authentication related ones, and these ones, and we can sort of just go through the logic of all of these endpoints as well in the source code here. Go to the API. Some interesting ones to take a look at, I would suggest, would probably be the authentication.py file, and we also want to have a go and take a look at the issues. So there's one closed issue, which authentication, but that seems to have been fixed now. But yeah, we got bogus ABV values, which immediately we get a little API token. So that might be something worth interest for us. And as you can see, we got ABV of 15, and that's not a valid thing, alcohol by volume, so that shouldn't be added. Developers get a bit lazy, being references to characters from Silicon Valley, which is not a show I've ever seen, so I honestly don't know if that's in character or not. But yeah, instead they push a little fix, and one of them complains, can we remove this sorry excuse for a quote-unquote patch before something awful happens? Always love it when a box winks at you for like, oh, look at this. And yeah, so if we go ahead and just examine that commit, we'll find that before it used to just send a request to the backend or something to with the user input to create a brew, and that's not really good. You really want to sanitize the user input, and then it just returns tool1, and we can of course do this and check what that is by going to http.cat and going tool1, and then we pipe that into fe, and we can see that tool1 is created. So that's the status code for it. But now it added some logic for handling that. So it uses an eval function that substitutes this value with the ABV key inside the JSON, and it checks if it's more than 1, then it returns ABV must be a decimal value less than 1.0, or if it's less than 1, if this returns false, then it will just do what it did before and put that in the database. So this is not safe because now we've got unsanitized user input running inside an eval loop, which executes Python code. That's not ideal, and something we can look into. If we go back into the user's public activity, we can see that this isn't the first time Dinesh messed up, because we got this commit history that hasn't been cleaned. And as you can see, we've got the credentials. We also saw a token in the issue, but that wouldn't have worked because the token actually expires. And that's why it's a good idea to actually read this authentication.py. And you can sort of see how the authentication mechanism works. You submit like a username, it gets you a time and 5-minute validity, uses a secret, again imported from this settings.py file, something to look out for. And yeah, so it looks like we got a good vector for it, and we can go ahead and just sort of start actually attempting to exploit this by going to the documentation for the API. And we can go ahead and have a look at the authentication login endpoint, which is kind of what we want. And let's see if it'll, yeah, so it's gonna tell us to do that, and we can go ahead and just grab this curl command and we can go ahead and send it a header. And we can do those credentials that we saw. So, this is a classic like credential exposure when something was previously hard coded for probably speed purposes in code, and then no one went ahead and actually cleaned that from a commit history. And what we want to do is we want to encode it as base 64, and that should get us a token. Let's see. Oh yeah, we want to run it with K. And yeah, we actually get authentication failed, which is not what we want. Yeah, I just forgot a space here. So yeah, and I don't really think we need this header in particular at all. So let's go ahead and yeah, immediately we are able to get a token, and we can actually check that token by going to https api.craft.htb api auth what is that? Check. And we get a message saying token is valid. Now we can start and go ahead and just exploit that loop that we saw, that eval function call, I should say. And we can see the data structure right there. So let's go ahead and just put that into a file just to make it a little bit more convenient. Now, if we leave it as string, it's actually going to error out. So I'm just gonna say 10 for now. And let's go ahead and see if we can just get the curl command from here as well. If we execute that, nice and easy, cool. And we don't need to put everything after data there. And again, I don't think we necessarily need to get the accept header in there. I think that's fine just the way it is. And we can do payload.sum. We also need to specify a header for the xcraft API token, just like we had it here. Nice. And again, we get a certificate error. And yeah, as you can see, we get the error that we saw in the source code earlier. So what we really want is to make a nice payload for it. Now, we're not going to see anything apart from that error because it's not a reflected command injection vulnerability. So what we really want to do is we want to go ahead and concoct ourselves a shell. Now, my favorite resource on that is Rev Shells. Now, if you try this, you're actually going to find that this is running inside a Docker container. What you're going to want to do is actually get this shell instead, which is going to be something that will work with a limited shell environment. Now, obviously, we want to get our own IP address, which is 1441 at present for the Tunnel 1 adapter. And we want to just go ahead and grab that. Now, we can't just run it as it is because, of course, we need some way to actually execute shellcode. Now, the best way to do that in an eval loop is actually not exec, and it's not like a standard Python shell because eval kind of has like its own weirdness to it. In this APV, we're gonna put import OS. Yeah, we can't do semicolons or new lines inside an eval loop, but we can do system. Then we're gonna put single quotes, and we're gonna do that in single quotes. Close the bracket, and I think that should be okay. Also, I don't think we really need this ID parameter. And yeah, so let's go ahead and just test out that payload real quick. Yeah, let's stay organized and everything. So I'm gonna just make a new window right here so we can get a netcat listener going on port 9999, and I'm going to just look at the payload, and we're gonna make a little request. So grab that command real quick and put that here, and see, unhandled exception occurred, but we do not unfortunately get a shell. So it looks like we messed up the syntax a little bit. Let me see if I can fix that. So we got yep, we got all that. Right, so I messed around with the payload a little bit. I think the only issue I really had was just these two underscores were missing before the OS rather than after. Not every day you use these types of things, but yeah, that's just kind of the kind of stuff that you get to deal with. So let's go ahead and grab ourselves a new token, and I'm just gonna replace this token with the one that we got, and I'm going to start an netcat listener, and let's go ahead, and here we are. Nice, we got a shell. So before we go ahead too far, I should point out that these credentials that we got, let me just copy them real quick. and we go into the sign in, something we haven't really explored yet, we can actually sign in. So we get a first bit of credential reuse, but unfortunately this doesn't get us any access to anything that we haven't seen before. So it doesn't lead anywhere, but something to keep in mind as we go on forward. That we got this nice little shell, we can go ahead and start enumerating place. So first of all, good thing to check out is who are we? And we see immediately root, which is very common. But if we go into the root directory, we can in fact not see anything that resembles a flag. Clearly we are not getting that flag, so we're not at the end of this yet. So let's go ahead and have a look in Etsy password. I'm just gonna do cat Etsy password grep v no login, and then grep v false, just to get rid of some of these users that are services, and we get shut down whole sh. We get something called Postgres, which is a database, of course, root and operator, which I don't know what that is. But another thing we can do is have a look at the kernel, which is a 64-bit kernel. Looks fairly up to date. We can have a look at Etsy OS release, I think. And we can see we're on Alpine Linux. If you list the root directory, we can actually see that there's a Docker env file. So we are inside of a Docker container. That means that we probably want to do some kind of Docker escape to get to the actual machine. Now, if we go into app, we can see that there is inside the craft AP. Sorry, I keep making these. It's quite a dodgy shell. It's still technically running inside of an eval loop, so not meant to be exactly interactive. But if we go into settings.py, we can immediately see that there's the credentials, and yeah, we got some connection details to the database, that the database host is something called DB. Now we can have a look at the resolve.com file, and we can see that we got a name server running on 127.0.0.11, and we can see in cat Etsy host that there is some container, by the looks of it, hard-coded on this Docker network. So it looks like we've got several Docker containers that are networked together and a name server in resolve.conf that is running locally so that we can connect to those containers by the container name via domain name resolution. Now looking at this, we can see the processes running, and it looks like it's just our shells. It's my few attempts at getting the right shell correctly. Oops. Unfortunately, I ended up doing netstat without the dash tulpen. I'm just going to redo the exploit real quick. No need to wait for this. If we go ahead and just have a look at the settings file again, which we noted down here, see the domain is DB. And if we look in netstat tulpen, we can see that there it is on the 11 IP on different ports, TCP and UDP. That's our name server. And it doesn't seem like we have any PSQL or MySQL utilities on here. Obviously, to connect to the database is just using Python for that. So we can't browse the database for any sort of credentials or any sort of other thing from here. But what we can do is we can get Chisel, which is pretty neat. First thing first though, we need to get the IP for the domain. Now we can forward TNS queries, but best to just not worry about that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little SOX proxy to get into the network of these Docker containers. I'm gonna do that using a tool called Chisel. So I'm gonna just get that from GitHub. And we checked that the kernel was 64-bit. So I'm gonna get the 64-bit binary for Linux. Always in the gunzip archive, and I'm just going to double get this, and then we should be able to do gunzip-d to extract the archive. Nice. And we can, I think, cd into it. No, I think actually it's just a binary. Yeah, so for our own sanity, I'm gonna go ahead and rename this binary to just Chisel, and I'm gonna do a change bond to give it execution permissions because we're gonna run it on this as well. And I'm gonna start a quick HTTP server because the containers can't download it from the internet themselves. Go back to our shell, and very gently we're gonna have a look at our IP. Already I messed that up. 10, 10, 14, 41. I think that will just error out. Nice. Do it again. 8000/chisel. That should let us get it, but unfortunately we won't be able to actually write it. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste this command, and miraculously Control W works. So even though I can't backspace properly, I can at least do Control W. So let's CD temp, where I think we'll have write permissions. Here we go. We're downloading it off of ourselves, as you can see right here. Nice. So now we'll also need to make it executable, and what we want to do is set up a chisel reverse proxy via socks. So we want to run a chisel server. You can close this now since that works just fine, and I'm going to run this like so. Reverse flag actually goes on the server side, not on the client side. Quite complicated to keep that in mind if you're still learning this stuff like I am. So chisel client 555 r socks. Now we are actually connected. Nice. We need to go ahead and add it to proxy chains. So we're just going to look at the default port, which is I think 1080, as we can see on the server window. So we're going to go and socks 5 127.0.0.1 because it's running on our local machine and on port 1080. So now we should be able to go MySQL U, and let's go and have a look at those credentials again. I think it's called the database user is Craft. We want to specify the host as ourselves, essentially. No, actually we want to specify the host as that IP that we got from the DNS response, 172.20.04. Nice. And we want to go ahead and get that password copied down as well. Don't necessarily need to copy DB. It's actually pretty good if we want to just not actually have that specified, so we can see what other databases that might be of some use. And yeah, I think that's literally it. I don't think we'll need anything else. Well, unfortunately, I forgot to add the proxy chains. So if we put proxy chains 4 there, we get TLS error. So we're just going to go SSL equals 0. Access denied for user Craft because I forgot to give the P parameter, even though you can't specify the password. And here we go. So we can go show databases. And we can see we got Craft, so let's go ahead and have a look at that. Show tables, and we can see we got brew and user. So let's go ahead and just select all from user, and immediately we got some credentials. And if you try them all, you'll notice that this one is the one that works. So let's go ahead and just copy that down. Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back to the website, and if we try these credentials now here on the website, let me sign out from the niche. We're going to get Guilfoyle, and we're going to type that in. Nice. And immediately we can see that we got access to a private repository that we haven't actually seen before. And looking at this, it looks like our theory was correct. And indeed, this is using HashiCorp Vault, and it's several Docker containers and combined. And if we look here, we've got a directory for all of these. And look at the secrets.sh. And as you can see, we've got SSH roles root one-time passwords. And so it looks like we're going to need to get into HashiCorp Vault to get a one-time password to get the root user on this machine. But first things first, we've got an ID RSA, we got an SSH key that wasn't removed, so let me get that raw. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that, a new tmux window, paste that in. There we go, and I'm going to save that. I'm going to see if I can use that to SSH on. Now, as you can see, the private key file permissions are too broad, and what you can do is you can go change mod 600 to change the permissions to the key file. But another thing I like to do is I like to paste that in, and I can save it as a root user, which automatically gives me the permissions that should be good enough to SSH into the thing. And as you can see, this is still asking for a passphrase for the key, but we can go ahead and get that same password again right there. Oops. And boom, voila, we are now in. If we have a look at our directory, we've got the user flag. Nice. Just do some standard enumeration right here. We can see we are Guilfoyle. We can do the same thing by listing the users. No login, false. And yeah, we can see that we're the only user apart from root, and root is enabled. It does have bin bash. Now let's see if we got any sudo permissions, and it looks like sudo is outright not found. So it looks like sudo is just literally not installed on this machine and we can't use it to do anything. So we can have a look at the process list and see what's running. So if we look at these processes here, we can see the virtual shells we're running. We can see the GOGS application that is running right here. And we can see Docker proxy exposing the ports that we detected on our initial port scan. But most interestingly to us, we can actually see, if we just scroll up a little bit, we've got the Vault using that config.hcl file that we were looking at on our private repository here. Oops, where was that? Yeah, it was here. Yeah, there it is. But we don't have a token for it. So we do have Vault installed, but the token that we need for accessing Vault is actually right here. If you just do ls and see the hidden files, there it is. And you just list it. And as you can see, the file doesn't even have a new line. So all we need to do is copy that and then hit Vault login. And then we just insert that token and we are now logged in. So now what we need to do is hit Vault SSH root at craft.hcb, and that should allow us to log in with a one-time password provided by Vault. So hit that and we can see the OTP for this session, copy that, paste it in, and voila, we got the root flag. Easy as pie. All in all, very nice box. Really enjoyed it. Really fun, very straightforward, not a lot of rabbit holes. Yeah, just interesting way to see how these sort of credential exposures and reuses can pile up on top of each other and how this can end up compromising the system. Well, and that's that.